The council chamber stretched across half a kilometer, filled with representatives from 63 different species. Holographic displays floated above each delegation, showing the grim statistics that brought them here today. 12 star systems lost in 3 months. Billions of lives consumed. The Xinthian swarm showed no signs of stopping. Ambassador Kelthis stood before the assembly, her forearms trembling slightly. Her people, the Vexari, were known throughout the galaxy for their peaceful nature and advanced technology. Now they faced extinction. The swarm had taken their outer colonies and moved steadily toward Vexar Prime. Every defensive fleet sent to stop them had been destroyed or scattered. "We have tried everything," Kelthis said, her voice carrying through the chamber's translation systems. "Our weapons cannot pierce their biological armor. Our strategies fail against their numbers. We lose ships faster than we can build them, if we do not find a new solution. My homeworld will fall within 6 cycles." The chamber filled with murmurs. Every species present knew the truth. The swarm represented the greatest threat the Galactic Council had faced in 400 years. Their ships were grown rather than built, their warriors bred by the billions, their hunger endless. They consumed entire biospheres and moved on, leaving dead worlds behind. Commander Vryn of the Takeshi Federation rose from his seat. His species were warriors by nature. The most militaristic race in the Council. Even they had suffered defeats against the swarm. "Ambassador Kelthis, we have deployed our finest battle groups. We have used every weapon in our arsenal. What solution do you propose that we have not already attempted?" Kelthis activated a data chip. Ancient records appeared on the displays, marked with red warning symbols. The text described a world discovered 700 years ago, during the Council's early expansion. A world classified as forbidden. A world called Earth. The records describe Earth as a Class 12 death world, Kelthis explained. The highest danger rating in our database. The planet's dominant species, called humans, evolved under conditions we consider impossible for intelligent life. Gravity 30% higher than standard. Weather patterns that kill thousands yearly. Predators evolved specifically to hunt the dominant species. Diseases that jump between species barriers. The list goes on for pages. Another delegate stood. An elder from the Lithe Collective. "We quarantined that system for good reason. The psychological profiles we compiled during our observation period were disturbing. The humans hunt other creatures for sport. They create weapons even during times of peace. They compete violently in games meant to simulate warfare. They are dangerous." "Exactly," Kelthis said firmly. "They are dangerous. Perhaps that is what we need." The chamber erupted in argument. Some delegates called the proposal madness. Others demanded to know what Kelthis expected from a species that likely had not even achieved spaceflight yet. The quarantine had been total. No contact, no observation, no interference for 7 centuries. Kelthis waited for the noise to die down. "I am not proposing we make friends with them. I am proposing we offer them a trade. We give them access to galactic technology and knowledge. They give us their military assistance. If the old records are accurate, humans are persistence hunters. They do not give up. They do not retreat. They fight until they win or die. That mentality might be exactly what we need against an enemy we cannot seem to defeat." The vote took 3 hours of debate. In the end, desperation won over caution. The Council authorized a single ship to make contact with Earth, assess their current development level, and if possible, request military aid. The Horizon's Edge was a small diplomatic vessel, chosen specifically for its non-threatening appearance. Captain Lauren commanded a crew of 12, including xenobiologists and first contact specialists. They expected to find a primitive civilization. Perhaps early industrial age. Maybe basic spaceflight if humans had progressed faster than predicted. The reality shocked them into silence. Earth's solar system was crowded with activity. Massive space stations orbited the homeworld. Mining operations covered the asteroid belt. Human colonies existed on 2 moons and 1 neighboring planet. Defense satellites formed layers of protection around strategic locations. The ships moving between planets bore different markings, suggesting multiple nations or factions. "This is impossible," the ship's xenobiologist whispered. "They should not have advanced this far." Class 12, Deathworld species typically destroy themselves or remain planetary for thousands of years. Captain Loren composed himself and transmitted the Council's prepared message on all frequencies. Within minutes, they received a response. Not from a single unified government, but from multiple entities. The humans, it seemed, had reached the stars without first unifying their species. A shuttle approached the horizon's edge. It was smaller than their diplomatic vessel, but built with obvious military purposes in mind. The design was blocky, functional, and covered in armor plating. When it docked, the airlock hissed open. The first human to board wore a uniform marked with symbols the translation systems could not immediately identify. He was tall by galactic standards, with close-cropped hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything he saw. His nameplate read Morrison. Captain Loren greeted him formally, explaining the Council's predicament through a translation device. Morrison listened without interruption, his face showing little emotion. When Ambassador Kelthus, present via hologram, finished describing the swarm's capabilities and the Council's repeated failures, Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "Let me make sure I understand," Morrison finally said. "You have a parasitic species consuming your worlds. Your weapons don't work. Your tactics don't work. You've been fighting them for months and losing badly. And now you want help from a species you've been avoiding for 700 years. "That is correct," Kelthus confirmed. Morrison's expression did not change. "You said the swarm has biological armor. What have you tried against it?" "Plasma weapons, particle beams, kinetic projectiles, electromagnetic pulses," Captain Loren listed. "All standard military hardware. Nothing penetrates their outer layer effectively." "Have you tried fire?" Morrison asked. The question confused the aliens. Fire was a primitive tool, rarely used in modern warfare. "Fire?" Loren repeated. "Chemical combustion. Flames. Heat-based weapons," Morrison clarified. "On Earth, we learned a long time ago that organic things burn." The simplicity of the suggestion caught them off guard. In their focus on advanced technology, they had overlooked basic solutions. Morrison continued asking questions, each one revealing gaps in the Council's approach that a Deathworld species would never have missed. After an hour of discussion, Morrison stood. "I need to consult with my government and military command. We'll have an answer within 24 hours. He moved to leave, then paused at the airlock. "One more question. When you say you want our help against the swarm, what exactly are you asking for? Do you want us to fight them back to their territory? Contain them? Or do you want us to completely eliminate them?" Ambassador Kelthus hesitated. The question felt like a test, though she did not understand why it mattered. "We want the threat ended. Permanently," Morrison nodded slowly. "Then you better be ready for what that means. Humans don't do half measures. If we agree to this, if we go to war against your enemy, we will finish it. But our methods might not match your expectations or your laws. War is ugly, and we learned that lesson the hard way over thousands of years." 3 human warships emerged from faster-than-light travel near Vexar Prime. The Council fleet had gathered at the staging area, dozens of vessels representing the combined military might of 15 species. When the human ships appeared on sensors, every commander turned their attention to the newcomers. The ships were wrong. That was the first thought that crossed Admiral Thex's mind. Council vessels followed aesthetic principles developed over centuries. Smooth curves, elegant lines, efficiency balanced with beauty. The human ships looked like they had been designed by someone who had never heard of beauty. They were rectangular blocks covered in gray armor plating. Weapons bristled from every surface. Even their names sounded aggressive. The ECS Valiant, ECS Relentless, and ECS Harbinger. Captain Ryan Fletcher commanded the small human fleet from the bridge of the Valiant. He was younger than Admiral Thex expected, perhaps 40 standard years, with sharp features and eyes that constantly moved, assessing and calculating. When he boarded the Council command station for the initial briefing, he brought 3 other officers with him. Lieutenant Amy Chen was small even by human standards, but something about the way she carried herself suggested coiled energy. Major Ben Harris was older, with gray hair and scars visible on his hands. Colonel Lisa Martinez moved with military precision, her uniform crisp and decorated with symbols that probably indicated combat experience. "Welcome," Admiral Thex began formally. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, we thank you for answering our call. Together, we will push back the swarm and restore peace to the affected systems." Ryan did not smile. He activated a holographic display that showed the recent battle history. "We reviewed your tactical data during our journey here. I have questions." Thex felt his confidence waver slightly. The human's tone carried no deference, no acknowledgement that he was addressing a decorated admiral with 40 years of command experience. "Of course. What questions do you have? Why did you retreat from the Turthos 9 engagement?" Ben asked, pointing to a specific battle. "Your fleet outnumbered the swarm forces. You had superior firepower, but you withdrew after losing only 12% of your ships." 12% is a significant loss," Thex replied stiffly. "We cannot afford to waste lives and resources on futile engagements." "You were winning," Amy said, studying the data. "The swarm was falling back to defensive positions. If you had pressed the attack, you could have retaken the colony. Instead, you let them consolidate and strengthen their position." Lisa pulled up another battle report. "This one is worse. You had 3 chances to cut off their supply route. You chose not to because it would have required putting your ships at risk. Now that route is fortified and costs twice as many lives to even approach." The council officers in the room exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ryan continued his analysis, pointing out tactical errors in engagement after engagement. Each critique was delivered without emotion, just facts and numbers. The humans dissected the Council's military strategies with surgical precision. "Your rules of engagement prioritize preserving infrastructure over winning battles," Ryan concluded. "You retreat when casualties reach 10%. You avoid weapons that might damage civilian areas, even when those areas are already lost. You fight like you expect to negotiate peace terms afterward. The swarm does not negotiate." Admiral Thex felt his temper rising. "We fight with honor. We follow protocols designed to minimize suffering and preserve life. War does not give us license to abandon our principles." "Your principles are getting you killed," Ben said bluntly. "The swarm has taken 12 systems because you keep fighting the war you want instead of the war you have." The briefing room fell silent. Finally, Ambassador Kelthus spoke up. "Commander Fletcher, we understand your assessment may be harsh but accurate. We called you here because our methods have failed. What do you propose?" Ryan pulled up tactical data on Turthos 9, the mining colony currently occupied by a swarm hive. "The Council has attempted to retake this location 4 times. Each attempt followed the same pattern. Frontal assault with heavy ships, hoping to overwhelm the defenders. It did not work because the swarm does not care about casualties. They will sacrifice thousands of warriors to protect the hive core." "What would you do differently?" Admiral Thex asked, despite his irritation. "We drop soldiers directly into the hive core using armored pods," Ryan said simply. "While your fleet provides a distraction at the surface, our strike teams hit them where they live. We do not fight through their defenses. We bypass them." "That is suicide," Thex protested. "The survival rate for deep hive insertion is less than 20%, according to our simulations." "Your simulations assume Council soldiers and Council equipment," Lisa said. "Human soldiers train for high-casualty scenarios. Our armor is designed to take damage. Our tactics accept that some of us will die, so the mission succeeds." The casual way she discussed acceptable casualties disturbed everyone in the room. Amy noticed their reactions and tried to explain. "On Earth, we have a saying, you cannot make an omelet without breaking eggs. War is not clean. It is not fair. If you want to win, you have to be willing to pay the price." Ambassador Kelthus looked at the battle plan Ryan proposed. It was aggressive to the point of recklessness by Council standards, but the Council's cautious strategies had failed repeatedly. How confident are you that this will work? 70% chance of success, Ryan said. 30% chance we lose the entire strike team. If we lose them, we will send another team. And another. Until the hive falls or we run out of soldiers. You would send soldiers on missions where they might all die? Thex asked, horrified. They volunteered, Ben replied. Every soldier on those 3 ships knows what they signed up for. Deathworld species do not produce soldiers who expect safety. We produce soldiers who expect to fight and maybe die. That is the deal. The Council reluctantly approved the mission. They had no other options. As preparations began, the human soldiers went about their pre-combat routines with an efficiency that unnerved the alien observers. In the hangar bay, groups of humans checked their weapons with mechanical precision. They joked with each other, laughed about previous battles, and showed no signs of the fear that Council soldiers would feel before such a dangerous mission. One soldier, Private Eric Santos, was approached by Mirren, a xenopsychologist who specialized in combat stress. "Are you afraid?" Mirren asked gently. Eric looked up from the rifle he was cleaning. "Sure. Fear keeps you sharp. But I have done worse deployments than this. The odds of survival are quite low," Mirren pressed. "Does that not concern you?" Eric shrugged. "Ma'am, I grew up in Detroit, made it through military selection trials where 60% wash out, survived combat drops on Mars during the colony wars. This is just another day at work." Mirren tried to understand. "But you could die." "Everybody dies eventually," Eric said simply. "Might as well make it count for something." That conversation was repeated throughout the fleet. The Council observers could not comprehend how an entire military force accepted death so casually. They did not understand that humans had been selected by their violent homeworld for traits that made such acceptance natural. Fear of death was normal. Letting that fear stop you was not. As the drop pods loaded, Captain Fletcher addressed his soldiers over the comm system. "You all know the mission. Get in, burn them out, take the hive core. Council fleet will keep them busy topside. We do our job, we save a few thousand colonists, and deal the swarm a serious blow. Stay sharp. Watch your corners. And remember your training." Fletcher out. No inspirational speech. No talk of glory or honor. Just facts and expectations. The pods launched. Small armored spheres that dropped toward the planet at speeds that would kill most species from the entry. The drop pods slammed into the organic walls of the Terthos 9 hive with bone-crushing force. Hatches blew open and human soldiers poured out into tunnels that pulsed with alien life. Sergeant Claire Woods led Alpha Squad through corridors lined with biological matter that oozed and shifted around them. "Flamethrower teams, up front," Claire ordered. Her voice was steady, despite the nightmare environment surrounding them. 2 soldiers moved forward carrying heavy tanks on their backs, connected to nozzles that could spray burning chemicals. When the first swarm warriors rushed around a corner, the tunnel filled with fire. The creatures shrieked as flames engulfed them, their biological armor, resistant to energy weapons and kinetic rounds, blackened and cracked under intense heat. The smell of burning alien flesh filled the recycled air inside the human helmets. On the Council command ship, Admiral Thex watched the helmet camera feeds. His stomach turned at the sight. Fire was a primitive weapon, rarely used in modern combat. Watching intelligent creatures burn alive went against everything he had been taught about civilized warfare. "They are enjoying this," whispered one of the Council observers, watching a human soldier grin as flames consumed another group of swarm warriors. Lieutenant Kevin Park's squad hit a junction where tunnels branched in 4 directions. Swarm warriors poured from each passage, attempting to surround the humans. A Council unit would have retreated, regrouped, called for support. Kevin's response was simpler. "Grenades, all tunnels," he ordered. Dozens of small metal spheres arced through the air. The explosions came in rapid succession, filling the junction with shrapnel that tore through biological tissue. The warriors that survived the initial blasts were met with close-range gunfire. Then the humans did something that shocked the Council observers. They drew knives. Bladed weapons had been banned from galactic warfare for 300 years. They were considered barbaric, tools of torture rather than legitimate military equipment. The humans wielded them with practiced skill, finishing wounded warriors with quick, brutal efficiency. Major Ben Harris coordinated the assault from his command post aboard the Valiant. His tactical display showed the positions of all teams, color-coded by status. When he saw one squad become surrounded, his decision was immediate. Echo Team, this is command. Hold your position. Delta Team, collapse Tunnel 7 behind the enemy cluster. Sir, that will trap Echo Team, the communication officer said. They have 43 minutes of air, Ben replied calmly. Delta Team will reach them in 35 minutes. Execute the order. The council officers could not believe what they were hearing. Ben had just ordered men trapped deliberately, using them as bait while other soldiers crushed their enemies. When Delta Team detonated charges that brought tons of rock down on the swarm warriors, the screams of dying aliens echoed through the tunnels. Echo Team survived with air to spare. They did not complain about being used as bait. They simply moved on to the next objective when rescued. This was normal for them. Acceptable. Expected. The strike teams pushed deeper into the hive, following a path mapped by AI analysis of the structure's organic patterns. They encountered resistance at every turn, and their response never varied. Overwhelming firepower, brutal efficiency, and a complete disregard for the rules of engagement that the Council held sacred. Jake Morrison led the final assault on the hive core. The massive chamber housed the Queen, a creature 3 times larger than any human. She was surrounded by elite warrior guards, each one capable of killing multiple soldiers. Standard Council doctrine called for siege tactics, starving the core of resources until surrender became inevitable. Jake's orders were different. Deploy the neurotoxin. Canisters rolled into the chamber, releasing gas that spread rapidly through the organic atmosphere. Mirren, the xenopsychologist monitoring from the Valiant, immediately protested over the comm channel. That weapon is banned by 17 galactic conventions, she said urgently. You cannot use chemical weapons against sentient beings. We never signed your conventions, Jake replied without emotion. And they are not sentient. They are a hive mind. Individual drones have no more consciousness than a finger on your hand. The gas did not kill the Queen's guards, but it paralyzed them. They stood frozen, aware but unable to move, as human soldiers entered the chamber. What happened next would haunt Council observers for years. The humans executed every paralyzed guard. Methodical shots to vital areas, ensuring death. Then they placed explosive charges throughout the Queen's massive body. Not just enough to kill her, but enough to guarantee complete destruction. No possibility of regeneration or revival. The Queen died slowly, in pieces, while human helmet cameras recorded everything, not for glory, but for analysis. Every moment documented so future battles could be fought more efficiently. When Captain Ryan Fletcher reported the success to Admiral Thex, his tone was professional and matter-of-fact. Turthos 9 Hive has been eliminated. Uploading tactical data now. We also located 43 colonists in cocoons. They have been transferred to our medical facilities. You found survivors? Thex asked, surprised. They needed emergency treatment, Amy Chen explained. Your medical protocols require 17 different clearances before performing invasive procedures. We do not have those restrictions. Our combat medics started treatment immediately. The rescued colonists recovered on human ships under the care of doctors who were also soldiers. The survivors told stories that disturbed their rescuers as much as their captivity. They described watching human soldiers move through the hive like they owned it. Efficient, brutal, and completely unfazed by the horror around them. One Vexari engineer, still shaking from his ordeal, recorded a message that spread throughout the Council networks. They saved us. I owe them my life. But I watched them walk through that place killing everything they found. They did not hesitate, did not slow down. They moved like predators hunting prey. I do not know if I should thank them or fear what they are capable of. The battle for Turthos 9 lasted 4 hours from first drop to final report. The Council's previous attempts had taken days and ended in retreat. Human casualties were 12%, but every wounded soldier survived thanks to aggressive medical intervention that started on the battlefield. That night, aboard the human ships, the soldiers gathered in their recreation areas. They drank, told stories, laughed about close calls and narrow escapes. To them, this had been a successful operation. Objectives achieved. Acceptable losses. Mission complete. They showed no signs of trauma or guilt. The council representatives watched from observation areas, trying to understand. These same soldiers who had burned aliens alive and executed helpless enemies were now gentle with injured comrades, respectful to medical staff, and showed genuine care for each other. Ambassador Kelthus met privately with Ryan Fletcher after the battle. Your methods are effective but disturbing to many council members. The way your soldiers fight, the weapons they use, the ease with which they kill. It troubles people. Ryan nodded slowly. I understand. Your species evolved on gentle worlds. You developed civilization in relative peace. War is something you do when you must. And you try to keep it civilized because that makes you feel better about it. And humans? Kelthus asked. Humans evolved on a world trying to kill us, Ryan said. Every predator, every disease, every storm could end us. We learned to fight, not because we wanted to, but because everything else wanted to eat us or take our resources. We developed weapons before we developed writing. We practiced warfare before we built cities. Violence is not alien to us. It is part of us. That does not horrify you? Kelthus asked quietly. Ryan was silent for a moment. It used to. When humans first reached the stars, we thought we would leave that behind. Become peaceful, civilized, better. Then we realized something. The capacity for violence is what kept us alive. The willingness to do terrible things when necessary is why we survived when everything on our planet tried to kill us. You asked us to help fight the swarm. You wanted warriors. This is what warriors from a death world look like. Kelthus had no response. She had called for help, and help had arrived. But the cost of that help was accepting that the galaxy now contained a species that viewed warfare not as a failure of diplomacy, but as a tool to be used efficiently and without remorse. In the days following the victory, more Council forces arrived to secure Terthos 9 and begin recovery operations. They found the hive completely destroyed, burned, and collapsed beyond any chance of regret. 3 months after Terthos 9, the war had changed completely. Human forces operated across 6 different fronts, each one showing results that the Council had thought impossible. Worlds written off as permanently lost were being retaken. Hive structures that had stood for years were burning. Colonel Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of a human command station orbiting Kepler 7, a world recently liberated from swarm control. Below her, teams worked to establish a permanent military base. Unlike Council operations that took weeks to set up, the humans had functional facilities running within days. Status report, Lisa ordered. Lieutenant Sophie Grant looked up from her console. Psychological warfare protocols are showing better results than expected. We have been broadcasting recorded swarm death sounds on their communication frequencies. 3 separate hives have shown signs of retreat before our forces even arrived. Admiral Thex, present as a Council observer, looked disturbed. You are using fear as a weapon? Fear has always been a weapon, Sophie replied. We are just the first ones to use it systematically against the swarm. Their hive minds share information, including emotional responses. When one hive experiences trauma, the others feel echoes of it. We are teaching them to be afraid of humans. The tactic worked. Scout reports confirmed that swarm forces were abandoning positions when human ships appeared on sensors. An enemy that had never shown fear before was learning it from species that had mastered the concept over millions of years of evolution on a hostile world. But the Council's Ethical Committee held emergency sessions almost daily. Delegate Porvis of the Centauri Assembly stood before the full Council, displaying footage from recent human operations. Look at this, Porvis said, his voice shaking. Images showed human soldiers using acid weapons that dissolved swarm warriors slowly. Other clips displayed sonic devices that caused the creatures to attack themselves in confusion. Hunter-killer drones pursued fleeing enemies through kilometers of tunnel, ensuring no survivors. These methods violate 43 different articles of galactic warfare conventions, Porvis continued. The humans are not fighting a war. They are conducting extermination with efficiency that frightens me more than the swarm ever did. Thanks for watching. Ambassador Kelthus rose to defend the humans, though her arguments felt hollow even to herself. We asked for their help. We begged them to save us. They are doing exactly what we requested. At what cost? Porvis demanded. We are winning battles but losing our moral foundation. How are we better than the swarm if we employ methods just as brutal? The debate raged while the war continued. Major Chris Wallace received orders for the most ambitious operation yet. Hive World Sigma had been completely overtaken by the swarm 2 years ago. Every council attempt to retake it had failed. The planet was written off, considered a permanent loss. Human command projected 72 hours to retake it. The plan was simple in concept, horrifying in execution. Orbital bombardment with kinetic weapons would target the Hive's ventilation systems. Then chemical weapons would be pumped through the tunnels. Ground forces would only deploy after 90% of the Hive was already dead. This is not warfare, Admiral Thex protested when he saw the battle plan. This is genocide. No, Chris replied calmly. Genocide is what the swarm does to every species they encounter. This is pest control on a planetary scale. The operation began with tungsten rods dropping from orbit. Each rod struck with the force of a nuclear weapon, but left no radiation. The impacts collapsed major tunnel networks and destroyed the biological ventilation systems the Hive needed to process atmosphere. Then came the chlorine gas. Simple, deadly, and brutally effective against swarm biology. Millions of organisms died in the darkness of their own tunnels, unable to breathe, unable to escape. When human soldiers finally deployed, they walked through a graveyard. Sergeant Nina Price's squad encountered pockets of survivors, young swarm organisms that had been protected in sealed chambers. Council protocols would require capture for study or, at minimum, a quick death. The humans used demolition charges to collapse entire sections, burying thousands alive. The helmet camera footage showed Nina laughing as the charges detonated. Not from cruelty, but from relief that the mission was going well. To her, this was just another successful operation. The Council observers saw something else entirely. Captain Ryan Fletcher submitted his after-action report with evident satisfaction. Hive World Sigma, retaken in 68 hours. Human casualties at 3%, all injuries non-critical. The planet's atmosphere will recover within 6 months. Recommend using this template for future Hive World operations. The Council should have been celebrating. A world thought lost forever was back. But the emergency sessions continued, now focusing on a new question. If the humans could be this efficient, this brutal, what would they do once the swarm was defeated? The breaking point came at Vexar Prime. A swarm splinter fleet attempted a final desperate attack on the Vexari homeworld. Human ships intercepted them in orbit with a weapons system they called the Grinder. Satellites deployed around the swarm fleet, creating overlapping fields of high-velocity projectiles. The space between the satellites became a killing zone, where organic ships were shredded into fragments. The swarm vessels tried to retreat, but the satellite network expanded faster than they could move. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Every swarm ship was destroyed, their biological hulls torn apart, their crews exposed to vacuum while still alive. It was the most efficient space engagement in recorded history. It was also the most brutal. Admiral Thex confronted Ryan on the bridge of the Valiant immediately after. Why did you not use plasma weapons for a clean kill? Why make them suffer? Ryan's response was cold and calculated. Because the other hives felt it through their collective consciousness. Now every swarm hive mind knows what happens when they attack human-protected space. Fear is a deterrent, Admiral. We are teaching them that fighting us leads to pain, not just death. You are teaching the galaxy to fear humans, Thex said quietly. Yes, Ryan agreed without shame. Because once they fear us, they will not test us. The best war is the one you never have to fight, because the enemy knows they cannot win. On Vexar Prime, the population celebrated their salvation. Human soldiers were welcomed as heroes, showered with honors and gratitude. Young Vexari began imitating human behavior, forming competitive teams, studying human military history, adopting human phrases. Fight to win became a slogan among the younger generation. They had watched the council fail and the humans succeed. They learned a hard lesson about the universe. Peaceful intentions meant nothing against an enemy that only understood violence. Xenopsychologist Mirren published her research in a paper that caused controversy across scientific communities. She documented how humans could switch between extreme compassion and extreme violence within hours. The same soldiers who burned enemies alive would risk their lives to save wounded comrades. The same officers who ordered chemical weapons attacks also personally visited injured aliens in medical facilities. The Deathworlder paradox, she called it. Humans were not evil. They were adaptable in ways that peaceful species could not comprehend. They could be gentle or brutal as the situation required. And they felt no internal conflict about switching between these states. Her conclusion disturbed the council more than any battle footage. Humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy not because they are cruel, but because they are not. They employ brutal methods while maintaining genuine compassion for those they protect. This psychological flexibility makes them unpredictable and therefore impossible to control through conventional diplomatic means. Colonel Lisa Martinez received a coded transmission from Earth's Central Command. More ships were being built. More soldiers were training. Earth's governments were watching how the Council reacted to human methods. If the Council tried to restrict or regulate humanity after the war, there would be consequences. Lisa kept this information classified, but she did not need to share it. Everyone could see the writing on the wall. Humanity had proven itself in combat. Their ships were superior to Council vessels, their tactics more effective than anything in the galactic database, their soldiers more capable than any other species could produce. 6 months had passed since the Council made contact with Earth. In that time, the swarm went from an unstoppable threat to a dying species. 14 systems had been retaken. Hundreds of hives destroyed. The parasitic species that had terrorized the galaxy for years was now on the verge of extinction. Only one target remained: Hive Omega, a massive installation built into an asteroid field at the edge of explored space. The Queen of Queens lived there, the original progenitor of the entire swarm species. She had survived for centuries, spawning the queens that spread across the galaxy. While she lived, the swarm could rebuild. The Council wanted to preserve her for study. They argued that understanding the queen's biology could provide insights into faster-than-light communication through organic means. They suggested capture and containment rather than destruction. Admiral Jake Morrison, promoted after his ground combat successes, now commanded the expanded human fleet from the ECS Devastator. The ship was 3 times larger than any Council vessel, a weapons platform designed for one purpose: overwhelming firepower. The briefing room on the Council command station held representatives from every major species. Jake stood before them, presenting the final battle plan. The holographic display showed Hive Omega and the human fleet's approach vector. The Sundowner is a directed energy weapon that generates localized solar temperatures, Jake explained. It will burn through the asteroid's outer layer and cook everything inside. Estimated time to complete destruction is 14 minutes. Ambassador Kelthis looked at the display with concern. Commander Morrison, the Queen of Queens represents a unique biological specimen. Surely there is value in capturing her alive for research purposes. No, Jake said simply. No? Kelthis repeated. Surprised by the bluntness, Jake turned to face the Council representatives directly. You called us to end the swarm threat, not contain it, not study it, end it. Leaving the Queen alive, even in captivity, creates a risk. Biological containment can fail. She could escape or be rescued. As long as she exists, the swarm can rebuild. We learned on Earth that when you have a cancer, you cut it all out. Colonel Lisa Martinez stood beside Jake. We understand the scientific interest, But security takes priority over research. The swarm has killed billions. They had their chance at existence. They chose to be parasites. Now they face the consequences. The council delegates argued for 2 hours. Some agreed with the human position. Others insisted that total extermination was morally wrong, even against an enemy as terrible as the swarm. Admiral Thex, who had become more accepting of human methods over the months, proposed a compromise. "Let us at least make the attempt to capture her," Thex suggested. "If it proves too dangerous or costly, then proceed with total destruction." Jake considered this, then nodded. "Acceptable. We will attempt boarding operations on Hive Omega. If we encounter resistance that threatens mission success, we switch to the Sundowner." Agreed? The council agreed, relieved to have some input on the operation. They did not realize that Jake had already planned for this outcome. Human boarding teams were prepared, but the Sundowner was charged and ready. One outcome or the other, the Queen of Queens would not survive the day. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the asteroid field. 20 warships, each one bristling with weapons. The swarm threw everything they had at the incoming threat. Millions of warrior drones launched from the asteroids. Hundreds of bioships moved to intercept. Captain Ryan Fletcher commanded the fighter screen from the Valiant. His pilots flew through the asteroid field with precision that should have been impossible. They used the terrain as a weapon, luring swarm ships into collision courses with space rocks traveling at orbital velocities. Lieutenant Amy Chen led her squadron in a maneuver that became legendary. When surrounded by enemy drones, she ordered her fighters to fly directly at a large asteroid, breaking off at the last possible second. Half the pursuing swarm ships could not turn in time and crashed into the rock face at full speed. "That is insane," a council observer whispered, watching the tactical display. "That is human," Admiral Thex replied quietly. The main fleet engaged with weapon systems that shocked even the veterans who had watched previous battles. Railguns fired projectiles at relativistic speeds, each impact releasing more energy than fusion bombs. Missile swarms with artificial intelligence tracking spread through the battlefield, each warhead independently hunting targets. Point defense systems created barriers of destruction around the human ships. Nothing could get close. Swarm drones died by the thousands, unable to breach the wall of automated weapons fire. Major Ben Harris coordinated the boarding operation from his command post. "All teams, remember the objective. We are looking for the Queen. If you encounter too much resistance, pull back. The Devastator will handle it from there." The boarding teams never got close. Hive Omega's defenses were too strong. The tunnels too heavily guarded. After 30 minutes of intense combat, Jake made the call. "All teams withdraw, clear the area. Sundowner is go." The Devastator's main weapon required 3 minutes to charge. During that time, the swarm seemed to understand what was coming. Their attacks became frantic, desperate. Bioships threw themselves at the human vessels in suicide runs that accomplished nothing. When the Sundowner fired, space itself seemed to tear. A beam of focused energy, containing temperatures that should only exist in stellar cores, lanced through the vacuum. The asteroid housing Hive Omega began to glow red, then white. The outer layer melted away. The tunnels beneath filled with plasma. 14 billion organisms died in minutes. The Queen of Queens, an ancient being that had spawned an entire species, burned away to nothing. Every egg, every drone, every trace of swarm biology in that asteroid ceased to exist. Across the galaxy, every remaining hive mind went silent simultaneously. The swarm, as a collective consciousness, died. Individual hives lingered for a few days, like limbs twitching after death, but without the central intelligence to guide them, they were no longer a threat. The war was over. Vexar Prime held celebrations that lasted for weeks. The Vexari people named human soldiers as heroes, erected statues in their honor, and declared an annual holiday marking their salvation. But in the council chambers, a different conversation was taking place. Admiral Thex stood before the assembly, presenting a detailed report. "The humans have violated 47 different galactic laws during their campaign. They deployed weapons of mass destruction. They engaged in total warfare against a sentient species. They demonstrated a capacity for organized violence that exceeds anything in our records. They also saved the galaxy, Ambassador Kelthus pointed out. Worlds that would have fallen are standing. Billions who would have died are alive. How can we punish them for success? The debate continued for weeks. Some delegates wanted sanctions. Others wanted to integrate humanity into the Council with restrictions on their military capabilities. A few suggested that humanity should be honored but kept at arm's length, too dangerous to embrace fully. Then Captain Ryan Fletcher requested to address the Council. He stood before the assembled representatives, wearing his uniform with no diplomatic niceties. He did not come to apologize or negotiate. He came to explain reality. "You called us because you were losing," Ryan said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You called us because your rules, your protocols, your civilized approach to warfare was getting you killed. We came and we won because we do not fight wars to feel good about ourselves. We fight to survive. That is what Deathworld species do." He pulled up images of Earth's history. Conflicts spanning thousands of years. Cities burned. Civilizations destroyed. Weapons that grew more terrible with each generation. This is what we come from. A world that forced us to adapt or die. We chose adaptation. We learned to fight, to survive, to win at any cost. You judge us by your standards. But your standards almost got you wiped out. Ryan paused, letting his words sink in. You want to control us now. Put restrictions on our military. Oversee our methods. Make us fight by your rules. But your rules do not work. We proved that. You can accept us as we are, or you can try to force us to change. But understand this. We did not come here begging to join your community. You invited us in, and we are not leaving. The silence that followed was absolute. Every delegate understood the implicit threat. Humanity had proven their military superiority. Their ships were better. Their tactics more effective. Their soldiers more capable. The Council could not force compliance from a species they could not defeat. The vote took 3 days. In the end, the Council offered Earth provisional membership with full military partnership. Human weapons were classified as deterrent-level armaments, restricted to use against existential threats. Human military advisors were assigned to Council forces, but their methods required Council approval for deployment. On paper, it looked like a compromise. In reality, everyone knew the truth. The galaxy had changed. The old order was gone. Humanity had arrived, and they had proven themselves not just capable but superior in the one area that mattered when survival was at stake. On the observation deck of the Valiant, the core human command staff gathered privately. Jake, Ryan, Lisa, Amy, Ben, and others who had led the campaign against the swarm looked out at the stars they had helped save. "They are afraid of us," Lieutenant Sophie Grant said. "They should be," Major Chris Wallace replied. Colonel Lisa Martinez had the final word. "We did not come here to make friends. We came to win a war." Mission accomplished. Now Earth has a seat at the table, and the galaxy will have to accept that Deathworlders are part of their community. As human ships prepared to return to Earth, carrying soldiers who had become legends across the galaxy, the Council began adapting to a new reality. They had invited warriors to save them from extinction. Those warriors had succeeded beyond all expectations. But success came with a permanent change to the galactic power structure. Human training methods were being studied, human weapons reverse-engineered, human tactics analyzed and adapted. The Council's military was being rebuilt along principles that came from a death world, taught by species who knew warfare in ways that peaceful civilizations never could. On Earth, news of the victory brought celebrations, but also preparations. Ships were commissioned, soldiers trained, weapons developed, not for conquest, but for security. Earth's governments understood that they had revealed their capabilities. Other species would watch, study, and eventually test them. Humanity was ready. They had survived Earth, the deadliest planet in known space. They had fought in the vacuum of space and won. They had taken their place among the stars, and they would not be pushed aside. The Council had called for help. The Deathworlders had answered. The galaxy was saved, but it would never be the same. Peace returned, but it was a peace enforced by the implicit threat of what would happen to anyone who broke it. The age of civilized warfare was over. The age of the Deathworlders had begun, and the universe would have to learn to live with what that meant. The swarm was being driven to extinction, but a new power was rising to fill the vacuum. A power that had not asked permission to join the galactic community. A power that had been invited in desperation and could not be uninvited. In the council chambers, delegates argued about the future. Some wanted to honor their agreements with humanity and accept them as full members. Others wanted to limit human military operations and impose council oversight on their methods. A few, like Delegate Porvis, suggested that humanity might be more dangerous than the swarm in the long term. Ambassador Kelthis found herself in the uncomfortable position of defending the species she had brought to the Council's attention. Her homeworld was safe because of human intervention. Thousands of Vexari who would have died were alive because human soldiers fought without hesitation or restraint. But late at night, when she reviewed the battle footage and casualty reports, she wondered if she had made the right choice. The humans were winning the war. But the price was not measured in lives lost. It was measured in the fundamental change to how the galaxy understood warfare, power, and survival. The old rules did not apply anymore. The age of civilized warfare was ending. The age of the Deathworlders had begun, and no one knew where it would lead. Outh. They also found detailed records left by the human strike teams, documenting every tactic and weapon used. The information was valuable from a military perspective, but it also served as a warning. This was how humans fought when they committed to war. No half measures, no mercy for the enemy, no hesitation. They had proven they could save worlds that the Council had written off as lost. The question now was not whether the humans could help win the war. The question was what would happen when the war ended and the galaxy had to live alongside a species that had shown exactly what they were capable of when given permission to fight without restraint. Admiral Thex filed his report with the Council's military command. He recommended continuing the human alliance while implementing strict oversight of their methods. He knew the recommendation would be ignored. The Council was desperate, and desperate people accept help from anyone offering it, even from monsters who fight for the right side. Acceleration alone. Inside each pod, human soldiers breathed calmly, checked their equipment one last time, and prepared to do what they did best. Admiral Thex watched from the command ship, his hands gripping the railing. He had committed to this plan, but every instinct told him it was wrong. War should not be this brutal, this accepting of loss. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose. Or perhaps like they had learned long ago that survival meant being willing to sacrifice anything. The pods vanished into the hive's entrance tunnels. For several minutes, there was no communication. Then Ryan's voice came through, calm and professional. Strike teams have made contact. Engaging enemy forces. Proceeding to primary objective. What followed would change the Council's understanding of warfare forever. The humans did not just fight the swarm. They hunted them through their own tunnels, using weapons the Council had banned and tactics that violated every rule of civilized combat. And they did it with a efficiency that suggested this was not new to them. They were Deathworlders. They had learned warfare on a planet that tried to kill them every day. Now they brought those lessons to the stars. And the galaxy was about to discover what that meant. He left without waiting for a response. The airlock sealed behind him, and his shuttle detached. In the silence that followed, the crew of the Horizon's Edge exchanged worried glances. Something in Morrison's tone, in his cold assessment of the situation, suggested they had just opened a door that might be difficult to close. Captain Lauren transmitted a message back to the Council. First contact successful. Humans were technologically advanced and militarily organized. They would receive an answer within one planetary rotation. What the captain did not include in his report was the sense of unease that settled over his crew. They had come seeking warriors to fight their war. They had found something else entirely, something that looked at warfare not as a last resort or a necessary evil, but as a problem to be solved with maximum efficiency and minimum restraint. The Council wanted help. The humans seemed ready to provide it. Whether the galaxy was ready for what that help entailed remained to be seen.